What's up, Pod Pals? It is your buddy Adam, and you're checking out Podcasting Business School. This is the show where I teach podcasters how to love their show like a hobby, but build it like a business. If you're looking for some podcasting tips on how to grow a podcast, how to increase your podcast audience engagement, how to monetize and make some dang money as a podcaster, you're in the right place. I've got my friend Jen here from the TBI Therapist podcast, and we are going to talk about some ideas for growth, engagement, and monetization. Jen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to dig in, and like I told you before we got started, I've got a ton of ideas for you, but I want to start where it's most effective and helpful for you to start. So when we look at audience engagement, we look at monetization, we look at download growth ideas. Where would you like to start the conversation today?
I want to say all the above, but I think probably growing downloads would be first step. From
Okay.
listening to you and all the other people I've been listening to, I'm trying not to get into content bloat, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's important. Like sometimes, not some. I mean, every once in a while, and the podcast coaches that exist out there, they're like, downloads don't matter, bro. And I'm like, well, they kind of do. Like, I'm doing this so that people will listen to it, and hopefully the right people listen to it. Like, just downloads for downloads sake, yeah, those don't matter. If you have, like, as far as I can tell, they haven't invented like fake downloads, like they have like Instagram fake followers that you can buy or anything like that. But just having your mom subscribe or whatever just to get a download. Or I've got the joke Instagram reel where I was like, you might be a podcaster if you've gone to Best Buy and subscribed every device on display to your show. Like, that's just a joke. I really don't want people to do that. But having ideal people that you can really impact with your knowledge and with the content,
yes.
that's what those downloads do matter. So I'm glad
And I
that
think,
we're starting here.
yeah, and value is so important to me. So I've been a therapist with people with a brain injury for 10 years. And so value to them is my most important goal. And I don't want to do anyone a disservice.
Yeah.
So I think it's an important message that I have. Nobody is really, I don't see any other therapist doing this kind of discussion in this
Yeah.
space. So part of that is like, oh my gosh, no one's doing this. The other part of that, I'm scared no one is doing this.
Well, I love it because I feel like you're niche down,
So niche.
the brain injury therapist. That's what TBI stands for, like the brain
Correct.
injury therapist. Now, let's start there. We may be missing out on some SEO because in my opinion, brain injury, that's like what sets you apart from all the other therapy podcasts. So listing the name as TBI Therapist, like is that what's actually listed in your Apple Podcast feed? I made that assumption.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Correct.
So because I know it's kind of a long name to be like the Brain Injury Therapist podcast, but having brain injury and therapist all spelled out in that title, that may be our greatest SEO weapon. That because you are niche down and you're not getting the SEO benefits out of that niche with your title by calling it TBI Therapist instead of the Brain Injury Therapist. So that's something I would strongly consider, because when we go SEO wise, the most power is your podcast title. Second most SEO juice is the description of the show, which you got that dialed in really nicely. And then we go episode titles. So that's something that I would consider.
Yeah.
Just to help the right people. Because you are so niche down, like you could have a really strong, like when people are scrolling through, all of a sudden they see the word brain injury flow through there. They're like, ooh, like this is something that fits the bill for exactly what I'm looking for. Like when I'm creating a show or consulting on a show creation, and I want the right people to raise their hand and go, wow, that's for me. Like Podcasting Business School, podcast launch tips, very obvious, to the point. So I would consider that. And you've listened to the show before, that that's a recommendation. I usually have some sort of name tweaking recommendations. That's kind of the token name tweaking recommendation of the episode. Any thoughts on that or questions, or how's that hitting you?
It's a valid point. I'm not saying it's not a valid point. I'm curious. So I would just like to see if the names are out there.
Yeah.
Is braininjurytherapist.com out there? Is This is live, so nobody take my
Yeah.
braininternetherapist.com.
They'll sell it back to you for several $1,000s. No, we're fine.
Right. Or so I could even niche further to go concussion therapist. But I've always worked with people of all various brain injuries. But a factoid is that 75% of brain injuries are concussions. So statistically, concussion folks would be the highest population I'd serve.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. So describe your ideal listener then for me. Like that's going to be helpful. Who's the ideal listener avatar that you can help the most?
Yeah, I think the person I can help the most is someone who's a professional, a go-getter, who's had a concussion and they've really pushed into their whole life. So maybe they've, been an entrepreneur, or they've really hustled and done a lot of schooling, or just up. And they get a concussion and they try to do the same strategies that they've done before, and they think, "Oh yeah, I know how to get over this. I just keep pushing and keep hustling and keep doing what I did." But it doesn't work. So after a brain injury, you can't hustle. Your brain shuts down on you. You end up in a dark room laying down, which is not recommended. You need to really have balance and think about, all the things that everyone should think about, that we're all thinking about right now, is balance and not sitting at our computers for 8 hours a day, because that'll burn anyone out. So that's a long little avatar, but that's what I'm thinking through.
So let me just give you some real life feedback here, because that totally changed the game for me, just from going from brain injury to concussion. Because when I hear the word brain injury, I think like they've been in a car wreck and like there's like brain damage is done, but I don't think concussion. I think like there has been damage to their physical brain, and like there's something, or it's like a genetic issue or something like that. Where you say concussion, I think about all of the freaking athletes out there that are now former athletes, or they were like, high school football players, and they're having these issues now that they're in their post-college life or their adult life, and they are hearing about CTE and all these things. It's like putting the dots together. That, to me, the word concussion just got leveled up big time with the importance of like naming, branding. Like I would give that some thought, even if you don't change the name of the show, but just the description. And then you go into your episode titles. What I would challenge you to do is go, all right, if my ideal listener was to go into Google, what are the top 5 to 10 questions they would type into Google to find answers like I'm delivering on the podcast? And then I want you to take that list, and those are your next 5 to 10 episode titles, because that's SEO.
And I feel
magic.
like I know just from working with my people what they need. It's always, I'm not sleeping. If you're not sleeping, you're hating your life. So that's a big focus that I work on with folks, is how do we get you to sleep better? And nutrition is really, really important. I'm not a nutritionist, but I think everyone has food issues that I talk with. So I'm talking with them about that stuff. And emotions, which it's my skill set. I'm a psychologist. So a lot of people will say, okay, yeah, we did your OT, we did your PT, we did all that stuff. You're going to go bye. And then they're like, what just happened? I'm freaking out over here and I'm not better. And my life is turned upside down. And I'm trying to put these pieces back together. I can't go back to work. The people at work think I'm crazy. And I tell them, you're not crazy. You have a concussion. This is horrible. And you're going to be okay. And this is how you do it.
Yeah. Okay. So we are totally aligned with like your content direction there. Like I love all that stuff that you just said. And I think like even dialing in with like episodes, like how do I know that my concussion is affecting me later in life, or whatever, like for that person that played college football, or, like me, I played middle school football, and I know that I had several concussions during that time period. how do I know that that's impacting me? Like, how do I know, like, and the more that you hear about all these things with people having serious issues later on in life from early youth and young adult concussions and things like that, or maybe they were in a car wreck and they
Right.
are have lingering effects out of that, or they've just fallen, or there are a
And
million
that's
different ways to get a concussion.
the largest way people could get a concussion is not sports, it's falls. So, and I live in Maine, so a lot of people just fall on the ice. It's
Yeah,
very, everyday things that people get a concussion from.
yeah,
And so they're like, I was just like walking my dog and I fell on the ice. And then they have years worth of symptoms and
yeah,
it's just really destabilizing for them.
yeah. Okay, so I think download wise, really looking at the SEO and really leaning into the word concussion and concussion recovery, how to heal, uh, different angles of attack for healing yourself from your concussion, things like that. How to know that you've had a concussion or that it's affecting you later on in life. All of those topics, I would put the word concussion into your episode titles as often as possible, because that's the fishing lure that draws the right person to take a bite and go, "Ooh, this show's for me." I think, or I bet you'll have people that are kind of power podcast listeners that come across that and go, "Oh, my husband needs to listen to this, or my wife needs to listen to this. I think this may
Yeah.
be an issue." So that's where I would start. Then next level, we want to think networking and go, okay, like, how can I leverage other podcasts, Clubhouse rooms, Facebook groups? That's the power of the niche that you're in, is you can go into a self-help Facebook or Clubhouse room or a therapy-based discussion, and you are niche down. You can be the concussion person and really stand out. And when they, that's how you get featured in that Facebook group or that Clubhouse room, as like, oh, the discussion's angling towards concussions. We need to bring in Jen on this because she's our expert person to speak on this topic. I do this in the podcasting space within larger business or marketing communities. So it's like a broad vanilla business or marketing community. I'm kind of the resident podcaster guy, and I'm able to add value whenever the topic of podcasting comes up. So I think that you can be that person and you can draw a lot of people into your world. Both, I mean, do you feel like you have therapists that listen to your show just to kind of get knowledge on how you treat this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I could see it going two different ways. I have all these, tangential kind of business ideas regarding training other therapists or helpers because they don't receive the training to work with folks after concussion or brain injury, and also helping the folks that do have a concussion or brain injury. Whenever I see people in psychotherapy after a brain injury, they're like, "You're a unicorn. No one does this."
Yeah.
So I think it's just really needed that my impact needs to be broader so that they can get what they need,
Yeah.
honestly.
So I could see, like, I know a lot of people in the general therapy space that have shows that I would love to introduce you to. Like, you're a great guest to go niche. That's, like, oh, this is really specialized information here that we don't hear a lot of people talk about. But also, like, you think about workshops, all these different collaborative, like, virtual summits, seminars, live stuff, like getting you in there. Like, my wife's a physical therapist, and I'm like, if she had a podcast, I'd want you to be on that show to go into that niche, because whether she's talking to physical therapists or whatever, like, you can really serve that. But I think that's a space where we haven't really started talking about monetization yet, but you could add some serious value to, like you said, training others to be better at addressing this issue, or affiliates and referrals. Like, you go on to a physical therapy based podcast and you have a group coaching program or a membership, and you get people into your world from that podcast community, then they get an affiliate and they're more apt to promote that and things like that. So that's honestly the power of the niche. And a lot of people are nervous about that, but you know, is your overall download capacity limited a little bit? Yeah, sure, because it's not for everybody, but you find the right people and grow that 1,000 true fans, 5,000 true fans, 10,000 true fans, the monetization is going to happen. So is that making sense
Yeah,
so
I mean,
far?
if there's like 250,000 people per year that have long-lasting concussion symptoms, then there's something most likely there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can get those people plugged in. So what I would look at is like go and start networking, like social media wise. Where do you tend to hang out? Where does your audience hang out at?
Yeah, so I've tended to do Instagram, which has been just feels like dropping stuff in a bucket and not adding up to anything. And I think there's just a block there for me professionally because social media wise, I've not really had a presence and I've not wanted to have a presence as a therapist. So I don't really share a lot on social media. So it's new for me to start posting all this stuff and asking people questions. Part of me has a little fear in that because of my profession and my license. So
Yeah.
I'm really, I'm putting all the disclaimers, this isn't medical advice, it's just information. But it just has me thinking,
Yeah.
and I'm not growing my list through Instagram. So I'm thinking of other ways to get out there to have people get on my newsletter or listen to the podcast and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. So I would take a good hard look at Clubhouse or any social audio platform. Because you're a podcaster, you've got great speaking skills, so that's kind of our wheelhouse as podcasters. Like social audio, it's easy for us because this is what we already do, and we stand
Yeah.
out from the crowd of people that aren't used to the audio format. But there are a few therapy-based rooms, clubs, discussions that I know people that are leading those discussions that I would love to make an introduction to. Like I'll at least make those intros. You can talk to them. And I've done this before. I actually did this today with one of my new clients. I was like, hey, so-and-so, I would love for you to just do me a solid, take my new client by the hand into your Clubhouse room. She's she's in the mental performance space. She works with athletes. It's a therapy-based room. Mental performance is a great subtopic. Just go in there and show her the ropes. And she's like, yeah, no problem. So like, I would love to make that sort of introduction for you just because I think like I see Facebook groups,
Uh, uh,
it kind of makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit.
oh,
But I think, especially if we can cut through all the clutter on Clubhouse, I can make a few intros to pull you into very specific therapy-based discussions. That could be worth a couple hours of your time just kind of playing around with, once a week or something like that. And we see what happens, because I think that you'll come across strong in the audio format, like I said, because you're already used to doing that anyway. So that's something that I would definitely look at. And like I've been pulling tons of people into my world off of social audio. So I've kind of got a recipe down for that I can share with you as well. But I mean, how's that sound? Would you at least be willing to try Clubhouse out a little bit?
yeah, of course. I do the app, so I have it.
Yeah.
I'm thinking through what is the best use of my time. I have one business already and two small boys, dogs in here.
Yep. Mine too. My dog is freaking out. She's very itchy today. She's like, so
the collar is off though.
Yeah. So, I mean, with social media, like I love the idea of you having this consistent content with your show. Let's find one, maybe two. It sounds like you already got some Instagram going. Like one, maybe two social media focus points that really are a great use of your time. And for me, my two are Clubhouse and Instagram, and they're kind of like peanut butter and jelly because it's very easy. Your Instagram account is linked to Clubhouse. And here's what I've found. I go on Clubhouse. I drop some knowledge on what I'm good at. I don't go on there screwing around rooms talking about Spider-Man or Marvel Avengers or lifting weights or whatever. I only go into podcasting rooms. Those are the only discussions that I host. So that's all I'm talking about. That's my hard, fast rule. So I don't waste any dang time. So I'll go in there. I drop knowledge. I stir it up. I've got a good, strong call to action where I'm like, hey, come to my next PodPal Zoom party, or, DM me to get connected and do a podcast audit. And so I've got that. People are pulling into my world. They will come and follow me on Instagram. We've already interacted on Clubhouse, so they're much more likely to comment and like my Instagram posts. Like everybody that comments on my Instagram usually comes from Clubhouse and it's just like, the ice has already been broken. The conversation has already been started. And so they're used to talking to me. So they'll drop way more comments than anybody else on my Instagram post. So it feeds back and forth. And then when I'm doing my next room, I'll advertise it on Instagram, and they'll be, oh yeah. And then they'll pop over to Clubhouse. And so that's worked really, really well. And I'm converting a lot of people into listeners, Instagram followers, and clients just from having genuine conversations on Clubhouse. It's a nice little easy extension of what we already do as podcasters. And like, if you have people on your show, you can have them in your room as kind of a follow-up interview situation. And that's nice little content, bonuses and things like that. So I think that would help with downloads quite a bit as well. As far as your show content, is it mostly solo episodes? Are we having guests on? What's that look like?
Yeah, I've done interviews primarily right now,
Okay.
and I'm going to do some solos. So I'm thinking of doing some short solo episodes because folks with a concussion or a brain injury, they don't want a long episode. They just want,
Yep.
like, give me the content. And I really don't like when I listen to a podcast, honestly, and it's like 10 minutes of, oh, my dog was, out today, and then he got a frisbee. And
Yeah.
then I thought I'd get some like, no one cares about that at
Yeah.
all. And so I'm like, I'm ready to go. What's
Yep.
the knowledge you're dropping? And so
Yeah.
I'm like that too. I want to get you the value and let's go.
Yeah. Like, I love the idea of you doing solo just because you've got individual and group coaching available. Like, we need to show you off on that from that frame and get that leveled up expert positioning as much as possible. So, and short, quick to the point, every other week like that. I love short solo episodes, because you could sit down for an hour and record several weeks worth of content just back to back to back, done. And then all you have to do is just the editing and the uploading, and you're way ahead on your schedule. And then you toss in your interviews every other week, like you said, something like that. So I love that. I know that you made a note about creating a community engagement lead magnet, like what I'm doing with Pod Pals. So where are you at with that? What roadblocks or thoughts do you have on that?
Yeah, I still have a block, honestly. I've been thinking through all the things about a workshop, but I think I'm still stuck in my therapy brain and what I do in therapy, and how would I translate that to coaching or to something that is kind of more fun, because it can be really heavy. I mean, brain injury, people sometimes are depressed or they're experiencing grief. And I want it to be something upbeat and something that people want to add to. So a couple ideas I had kicking around were potentially having some of my podcast interview guests back on and them having like a little spotlight or something. My issue with that is that it's highlighting them, not me,
Yeah.
which isn't a bad problem. If I do, I don't mind doing that, but I think it won't necessarily push the needle with stuff I want to do. So I don't think that would be a great use of my time necessarily if I want to promote my coaching offerings.
Yeah. I think normally I like to go community engagement lead magnet, like the group thing, and then look at like an audit style episode, like what we're doing here. But I think it may benefit you more to do what we're doing here first, um, to show off your coaching specifically. What I would challenge you to do is develop what I call an ideal customer timeline or journey. So I did this with episode 220 of Podcasting Business School, where I mapped out the podcasting success timeline. I say, okay, from start to being a highly successful podcaster, I've mapped out 4 different phases. Here's the phase. Here's the unique name of the phase. Here are the symptoms of why you're in that phase. Here's the action step checklist to go to the next phase. So I would challenge you to create a journey timeline where, just like, obviously you're way more dialed in than I am, but just I'm thinking like, who is this person pre-injury? Let's talk. And then the next phase is like the moment of injury, the immediate aftermath of that injury, and then kind of the lingering effects phase, and then the transition to recovery phase. So maybe like 3 to 4 phases from pre-injury to recovered from injury. And I would map that out and then do a coaching session like this and go, oh, ask certain questions, kind of diagnose where they're at, and go, all right, you're in phase 2 because of da, 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 da. Here's what we need to accomplish to move the ball to the next phase here. And that will naturally, like, you're initiating momentum, that will naturally create questions for them of like, well, how do I keep going? And that's where your coaching comes in. And that's an easy, if the timing's right and people are like, hey, let's do business together. I want to join your membership or your group coaching, or I want to do one-on-ones with you. But also the people that are listening in, this is leveled up. Like this could be your solo episode, or this could be, maybe you go solo, guest, coaching style episode, and you have a 3 rotation. Or like me, like these are my most popular episodes. I couldn't not release these every week. So I just created a second episode every week just to do podcast audits, because I can have the
I
most
love hearing
fancy,
them.
well, I mean, I can have the most fancy and famous podcaster on the show, and it'll do half the amount of downloads as this episode right here, Jen. I can have Pat Flynn on and John Lee Dumas at the same time. They'll do half the downloads of your episode, because you're asking the questions and saying the things that my ideal listeners want to hear, and they want to hear me talk about. So
they're listening. They're trying to figure out their own journey. They don't really, GLD is awesome, but everybody's heard what he has to say at this point. No, he's great. And he's from Maine.
There you go. So he's got to be good. He's got to be good. But I mean, is this making sense? Like, do you feel like this is a doable thing?
Sense. Again, it's probably my therapist. It has messed me up. So I'm like, okay, I get him on the audit and we're talking about your brain injury. I use the word diagnosis and my board is like, you can't say that.
Yeah.
So that's an ethical thing. So then how do I make it not?
Well, that's okay. This is an issue that we definitely have to address, because it's important. Like there's like legal ramifications. Me saying where you're at in the podcasting success timeline, there's no like legal ramifications of that. So there would need to be a little disclaimer action at the beginning of the session for both the person and the audience listening. But I think this is the advantage of developing that timeline with the different phases of recovery or whatever, because you aren't necessarily definitely would not use the word diagnosing, but like I would place you in phase 2 because you are experiencing this, and this. Like you're not like it's obviously they've had an injury, like they know this, like that's already said and done. So you're not like, do you have a concussion? Do you not? Like we're just talking about the recovery process. So I think you are in phase 2 of your recovery. Here's why. Here's how we go to phase 3. I mean, do you feel, is that ethically like, I don't know. Is that something that you could do, or are you nervous about that even?
I'm nervous about it, if I'm being honest. So that's what stopped me on these community lead magnets. So the only thing I come back to is, okay, I'm teaching something. And then I feel like then I'm in academia again. And I'm like, do I have to put an APA reference? And that's
yeah. So are you more comfortable with just like straight up advice on what to do next to heal better? Like, are you like, if somebody's like, I'm experiencing, you go, all right, what are you experiencing? What are you feeling? What are you struggling with? What are the main issues that you would like to improve? And they lay it out there. I'm not sleeping. I'm not doing this or that. And then maybe like with this session, obviously we focus on 3 points: audience engagement, monetization, download growth. Maybe you could just focus on sleep, relationships, and stress levels or productivity or something like that. And you go, hey, where would you like to focus? What's the biggest thing that you're feeling really is holding you back now? Sleep, relationships, or productivity? And they say, oh, productivity. And you go, all right, well, where are you struggling with productivity right now? Oh, I do this and this and this. Oh, well, let's talk about what I suggest to improve that. I mean, do you feel like that's a conversation that you could have, like, and not feel legal pressure?
Yeah. I mean, I think I could do something around more what we call like cognitive compensatory strategies. So, okay, you need something for your attention or your memory or for executive functioning, which is pretty much a calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, we can tweak your calendar or something like that. But maybe I wouldn't get heavy into the emotional components of the injury, which is very important that we get there.
Yeah.
And I think it's always part of the work.
Yeah. I think like, let's use this whole legal situation to your advantage. Like what I would say is, with the disclaimer, obviously the emotional root of all this, the mental impact, that like the actual mental steps that need to be taken, that is therapy. I'm not going to be able to deliver therapy over the interwebs like this. This is what people pay me for. So let's use that and go, let's work around all the other things like you just said, give them some baby steps. And then the conversation afterwards, obviously to do therapy, that's, a paid and protected client and therapist relationship. Here are your options for that, off air sort of thing. That could make sense. I mean, that could be actually make building your business easier, which usually that people in the service industry or self-help industry are a little not great at sales conversations. Like, I'm not great at sales conversations. That's why I don't have them. I just add as much value. And when it makes sense, people are like, hey, I need to hire you as my coach. Cool. Let's do it. So
Yes.
I don't know.
We're notoriously bad at that.
Yeah. I would just think through that, but just think like, what is a simple momentum building value add? Like, I love the idea of you being able to say this area, like you said, sleep already, and sleep, productivity, anger management,
stress management, anger management. All those are huge.
Yeah,
ideas.
And that could be.
I like the idea of seeing someone who's kind of come on the other side of their journey, and seeing people at different phases.
Yeah,
and it's been 10 years, but hey, I still struggle with X, Y, and Z, but I've gone through those early phases, and that's not part of my life right now.
Yeah. So maybe the whole timeline thing isn't a good fit because just legal issues, but I would definitely work through this idea. And I think this will be easier for you to pull off than the group thing, because then it's like all sorts of different issues, and then you can get into like the legal worries and all that. But one-on-one, have them fill out some information so you know ahead of time like what really the issues are. You can come prepared, and you can add value that you feel legally secure that, we're not gonna get any trouble there, and drop knowledge, create it, really show off your coaching, what you can add. That person may or may not become a client, but people listening in now, all of a sudden, Coach Jen is Coach Jen. And it's not just Jen, the podcast lady that interviews other experts. Like, you become the expert. I think that's gonna help your business a ton.
And I think they would get a lot of value out of just sharing their story. That's part of them. This is really upended my life, and I want to get to the next level. I want to get beyond this, and I want to help you, the person at home who has a concussion.
Yeah, almost like concussion recovery stories. Like, yeah, I love that. So dive into that for sure. I think there's something there. It's worth your time exploring. I definitely think the Clubhouse, this one-on-one coaching style episode, those can be some pretty nice game changers for you. Also obviously for monetization with the coaching style episode. So I think that'll be well worth your time. And I'm going to be respectful of your time. I'm getting chatty once again, as I always tend to do. But shout out your show. Where do people go if they want to dive into your world? They want to listen to your show. They want to go to your website. Give us all the things.
Yes. So the best place is probably tbitherapist.com. And I'm on Instagram at TBI Therapist. And my podcast is the TBI Therapist podcast. So it's pretty much consistent. And I'd love for you to reach out, especially if you're a concussion survivor. I have a grounding guide if you just want some tips on how to regulate your nervous system, which is your body pretty much for you.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Make sure you guys check out Jen's info. Go and connect with her. If you all want to do a podcast audit, just like our friend Jen, head on over to the website, podcastingbusiness.school, get signed up. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, my pod pals, I will send you out into the world wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. We'll see you next time.